Servus. Hello, Nathan Rose here, coming to you from Austria, where I'm playing in a classical over-the-board chess tournament. In this video, I'm recapping one of my games, what we can learn from it, and hopefully have a bit of fun along the way. And this was a fun game. Now, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please hit the subscribe button. I do a lot of different content on chess, including game reviews, but also my favourite software, tips on how to improve, and lots more. So by subscribing, you won't miss out on any of the great stuff that I've got coming up. Before we get started, I wanted to share a little bit about the venue. So it's being played in a hotel, and the hotel itself has a couple of aeroplanes attached, as strange as that may sound. It's called the Nova Park Flugzeug Hotel. The blue plane is a Boeing 727-200, and the red plane is an Ilyushin 62M, which I'm told is a Soviet-era plane. And you can go inside them, and you can even eat there. So that's quite fun. I'll share a couple more snippets from what the tournament surroundings looks like in the next video. But on to the game. I've got the white pieces, and let's just get right into it. So we get a French defense, and I'll go through the opening moves pretty quickly because the game gets interesting later. We don't need a full masterclass on the French defense here, but just know that all of these moves are pretty standard. I'm playing the Tarrasch variation, and okay, we are both about to get castled, but before I do that, I want to trade off this dark squared bishop, because this square, the e5 square, is a weak square that I want to ideally land a knight onto at some point. But with black's dark squared bishop that makes it harder to do. So I want to make this trade. This is a good tip straight off the bat to try and eliminate the defenders of weak squares. So we get this trade. Black castles, and I castle as well. I do have to worry about a discovered attack on this knight because this knight is currently without a defender. Black plays king h8, which I've labelled as an inaccuracy because it is a bit slow. Black really needs to spend these opening moves to get better developed. It's nothing terminal, but it is not quite according to the theory. Rook e1 puts some pressure on this backward pawn, often a thematic idea for white to target this pawn when playing against the French defence. And black defends with queen to d6. And so, given that I eliminated that dark squared bishop before, I can actually jump in with the knight right now. You'll notice that this does leave the d4 pawn without a defender. Before, that knight was defending this pawn, but it's still defended indirectly. If black were to take it, that would fail because you can sacrifice the bishop, and however black takes back, then you can pick up the knight. And because of the loss of the h7 pawn, there's some nasty threats coming in with these knights on the g6 square. So black can't take that pawn. Black also can't take the knight, because then there would be a fork of the queen and the knight. The knight is fantastically placed on e5, and the fact that black can't capture it is great news for me. There's ideas of a fork on f7 if this rook was to ever move away from guarding that square. And just in general, I'm getting a lot of pieces quite close to the black king. So an attack is definitely in the air. Black plays knight to e4. And at this point I stopped and I thought on this move for more than 45 minutes. So you get an hour and a half to start the game on your clock. And the fact that I invested more than half of my entire time just on this move should tell you that I had to calculate a lot, and the lines are quite complex. So let's go through them. Let's go through a few of the possibilities. Firstly, you could take the knight. That's the easiest one. The line that you have to look at here is what if black doesn't take the bishop back. I mean, if he does take the bishop back, then that's quite easy because now the rook defends the knight and you've just won a pawn. But instead of taking the bishop, what if the rook takes the knight? Well, in that case, you can just move the bishop away, and this pawn actually can't be taken. Can't be taken by the rook because of the fork. And even though black will win the white queen, when the dust settles, white has an extra rook. So that's winning for white. Can't take with the knight either, because then you can just push the rook away. And wherever it goes, let's say it goes back to f8, then the knight will be lost. So that's seeing white win a piece. So that was the simple option, but I was looking for something better. Another line which is quite tempting is to start off with a check on g6. So you sacrifice one of the knights, and then you take with the other knight. There's a fork here between the king and the rook. The idea is not so much to take the rook. If you do that, then black has got two minor pieces for one white rook, which as a rule of thumb is generally better for the side with the two minor pieces. So that didn't appeal. But I was trying to work out, well, what happens if you don't take the rook, but instead you bring the queen in, and can there be some kind of mating net here? Turns out there isn't really anything, but it took quite some time to figure that out. But the line that was very tempting, which I ended up playing in the game, was after knight e4, queen h5, so bringing the queen in immediately. This leaves the knight undefended. So yeah, I had to spend time because this is very committal. Of course, I'm giving up a piece. Black goes ahead and takes the knight. And what took me a long time to figure out was that the key line is not the tempting knight to g6 check. That's actually no good. Calculation will prove. Spent a long time thinking about this too. Because you might be able to take the rook, but then black takes the knight, and again it's two minor pieces for the rook. Advantage black. I was trying to see if there was some kind of checkmate, but black can just move the queen back. So it's quite a long line, and you've got to really stretch your visualization capabilities to their limit, or at least my visualization capabilities, to be sure of all of this. But it turned out I was correct. This line was no good either. But the line which I ended up finding eventually is after queen h5, rook takes f4. The second brilliant follow-up is to actually take the knight with the rook. This is pretty stunning, and this is correct. This sacrifice works. So all of my time invested actually paid off here. So let's look at what can happen. Well, if you take the rook with the pawn, then you have this checkmating threat. And black can't take with the rook because of that fork. Remember I said that knight on e5 was well placed? Well, here's a line where that proves to be decisive. And actually that's not even the best move. The best move actually is to play queen to e8 because of the back rank mate. You can defend once, but that's checkmate. So yeah, this is a checkmate threat as well. And there's also the threat of coming in here. So it's not at all easy for black to defend this. Even so, after taking the knight, brilliant move, correct. Black found a defense which I didn't see, even after all that time calculating everything. I didn't see the move rook to f5. Well, I did kind of see it, but I just assumed that this wasn't possible because I thought, well, in that case, you just take the rook, and after you take back, then you fork and win material. But as it turns out, at the end of the line, the white rook is hanging, so white hasn't won any material at all here. And furthermore, this pawn structure is probably quite good for black. This bishop is free to move now, and this white bishop is not so happy. So after rook to f5, I've got to think again. And now I'm getting seriously low on time. Because because it wasn't just the 45 minutes I spent. It was, I'd spent some time on the opening as well. So I'm down to probably about 15 minutes in total, and my opponent, from memory, had more than an hour still on his clock. So a big time imbalance there. It turns out the correct move here is to play this check, queen to e8, which I didn't think really worked because I thought, well, then you just block with the queen. But the point is you actually trade queens and then play rook h4. This is crazy. I can't really blame myself for not seeing all of that, even once I reached the position after rook f5. That's very difficult to see everything. So what I ended up playing instead was knight to f7 check, which is a mistake because of the other line. It's not the top move. And I expected that black here had to play rook takes f7, which would be winning for me, because then, well, I've won an exchange for a start, and black doesn't have time to take this rook, again, because of the back rank checkmate. You can see actually that black king is quite a bit less safe on h8 than it was on g8. But instead, of course, black just plays king to g8. And what now? Again, it's a bit frustrating because I'd spent all this time on that calculation, which I thought was working, and all of a sudden I don't seem to be gaining much at all. So I can take the queen, but then I lose my own queen, and, well, the game continues. I move the rook and we play an endgame. But this is not what I was hoping for. So instead, I got too ambitious here, and I sacrificed again. I was down to probably less than 5 minutes by this point, so I sacrificed here. Now this sacrifice doesn't work. The problem with spending all your time is that you can find yourself in another critical position where you need that time that you've already spent. So it's important not to just calculate accurately, which I did earlier, but you need to be a bit faster, right? Because you can get surprised, as I was, and then you still have to have a bit of time on your clock to play the rest of the game. So this sacrifice doesn't work. I sort of thought that if this knight is taken, then there's going to be too many threats, but black can just block and be okay. The king can run away, and that's what happened. He went to f8. So I've sacrificed a piece. Yes, I've gained some pawns and I've gained some king safety trouble for my opponent, but this is not enough. This is not enough. Black is actually doing much better here. He has to get developed, it's true. This bishop and this rook are still on their starting square, but I've got an uphill task ahead of me to prove that there's actually any compensation for the material that I've sacrificed. So this creates a one-move checkmate threat, which my opponent sees and deals with, of course. Queen h8 check. I really don't have much of a plan here. I'm just playing for tricks. The black king runs to e7. I try and bring another piece into the action. And black obviously wants a queen trade. If I trade queens, then the game is as good as over. So of course I don't allow that. Now, king to f6 I think was a little bit foolhardy. Much safer would have been to bring the king to d6. As a general rule, when you're defending, you want to be close to your own pieces, and the black king on d6 is surrounded by the knight, the bishop, the queen, a couple of the pawns. I really don't have anything here. But on f6, yeah, it's a bit more out in the open, so this is a mistake. I bring the rook to e3. Again, this is just a one-move threat, really. It's trying to go for this skewer of the king and queen. And black just takes a pawn to prevent that plan. I bring the bishop back, maybe to free up this square. Again, there's not really much here. Black again offers the queen trade. I again decline the queen trade, and now black starts to get developed. So really I am running on very little hope right now. I've just got to try and keep the queens on the board and pray. I am trying to, again, just make a one-move threat. That's what I've been reduced to here. And black plays a very good move here. I mean, brings the bishop into the game with a threat and also defends the knight. So I'm trying to respond to the threats with threats of my own. So now there's a threat. And black decides to advance the pawn again, which I think is a practical mistake because it lets the queen in. One thing about my opponent here is that he was playing very fast as well, which is actually quite well known to be a mistake. He's trying to keep the pressure on my clock because I'm down to so little time, but he has still, I would say, about an hour on his clock, but he wasn't using it. He was trying to make me react quickly and hope that I would run out of time, rather than find the best move, which of course would be the best way to keep the pressure on my clock. Like if he plays a very strong move, and then I have to react to it with only 30 seconds or so, then that's much harder than him playing fast as well when he didn't need to. Okay, so he blocks with the bishop, but now I get a tactic in. I get a quick tactic in with bishop takes e4. If you take the bishop, then you lose the knight. So I've won a pawn back. This is still much better for black, don't get me wrong, but the tide is starting to turn. Rook to c8. Okay, that's a threat of checkmate, so I have to deal with that. Simply h3. And again, I think black here would have been well advised to just offer the queen trade. Queen to c7, for example. Okay, black has lost a couple of pawns, but once the queens are traded, all hope that I had was gone. And in addition, once the queen moves, I don't even know where the queen moves to, but if I avoid the queen trade, like, it's saying that the best move for white here, according to the engine, is to go for the queen trade. But let's say I don't trade queens, well then actually you just take the bishop, and now black is two pieces up, and that's as good as over as well. Instead, he wins a tempo on the queen, but that's giving up the defense of this square. Again, my opponent is playing too fast here. He's not thinking about all of my best replies. So queen to d8 check, and the black king is a bit short on squares here. These light squares are taken away by my bishop. Some of black's own pieces are taking squares away from the king as well. You can't go to e5 because then there's a discovered attack, which leads to mate. Getting mated by the pawn, never very nice. What black needed to do here was to block with his queen. I understand why he didn't do it, because then there's another check from h8, but still, this is the path that black needed to choose. Instead, black chose to go to f7 with the king, but this allows another trick. Another trick is bishop takes d5. You can't take back because then there's a skewer of the king and queen. And now white is winning. So given that he can't take this bishop, black instead gave this check. That's fine, I've got the h2 square. Trying to trade queens, which I'm not going to allow. I take the bishop, and obviously black can't take back with the queen because then rook takes. So he takes with the knight. Then I've got this check, queen to e7, rook f3. Now if the king steps away, then the queen will be lost. So he has to block with the knight, and at this point we've reached move 40. This is very important because at move 40 you get an extra 15 minutes on your clock. So from playing every move with 30 seconds, I've now got some time to breathe, think, and come up with the best move. With some time to think, I realised that black's problem here is the pinned knight in front of the king. So you need to have time to play g3 in order to exploit that pin and win the piece. But in the meantime, you need to avoid the queen trade. So I play queen to d2, which wins a tempo, a crucial tempo, because once the rook moves away, then you'll have time to play g3. What black does instead of moving the rook away is he plays queen to e1 with a checkmate threat, right? But after all that time of avoiding the queen trade, now I can actually initiate the queen trade and play g3, winning back the piece. So an incredible turnaround here. Black played rook to e4 and offered a draw. And I felt a little bit sorry for my opponent, but not so sorry enough that I accepted the draw. No. Chess is a tough game, and some lessons need to be learnt the hard way. So I do have an extra pawn in this endgame, and, well, the endgame is, of course, not going to feature as many fireworks, but there are still a few instructive moments. What I do here is I'm winning tempo again against the pawn so that I can push the black king away next move. b6 saves the pawn, but now black's king has to go backwards. I didn't want to play king to g4 immediately because that could allow a discovered check, and that's just something to calculate. So no, f3 first and then king to g4. Yeah, from here the game progressed pretty quickly into a winning endgame. I marched the pawns up the board slowly. I've got an extra 2 pawns now, and black is the one now making one move threats, but in a rook and pawn endgame there's no king safety trouble to complicate things. So as long as I'm careful, I can just slowly move the pawns up the board and look to promote one of them. Black gives a check, and in this position resigned. These 2 pawns are going to be pretty hard to stop, and in the meantime my king has got all the way over here and is going to win some of the black pawns on the queen side as well. So as far as comebacks go, that is right up there. Never resign, right? As the saying goes, no game was won by resigning. And of course my opponent should have finished me off there, given that unsound piece sacrifice, but keep fighting. So what can we learn from the game? Okay, I think a couple of things stand out. All the way back after this position, you don't want to sacrifice unsoundly when you're low on time. Like, I made this move based on intuition, but intuition is fallible. You need calculation. So when you're in a situation like this and you just don't have time to calculate, you should go for the safer option. This would have been an equal endgame. Maybe I wouldn't have won this equal endgame. Who knows? It's impossible to tell. But this, of course, was the much better way to play objectively. Aside from that, I think the main lessons from this game are really learning from my opponent's mistakes. After this check, the black king was much safer on d6, sheltered by its own pawns and close to its own pieces, than the move he played in the game, king to f6. And then a few moves later, my opponent had everything going for him. He had extra material and a ton of extra time, but he didn't use his extra time. He instead fell into the trap of playing fast, trying to keep pressure on my clock instead of playing the best possible moves. He makes a few mistakes, and then I start to get a few tactical tricks in, which was totally unnecessary on his behalf. He could have been more careful and avoided any of the counterplay that I was able to eventually generate. Always use your time. If you enjoyed this video, do drop a like down below. I'd really appreciate that. If you want more videos like this one, subscribe to the channel, and do drop a comment down below if you enjoyed this format. These recap videos are still something that I'm experimenting with, so if I get good feedback, then I'll do more of them.